Welcome to The Lived Experience. I'm your host, Joel Kleber. And on today's episode, just going to give you a quick recap of where I've been probably for the last couple of months, 3 months, and I haven't been so active online, so stay tuned to today's episode. And if you're a first-time listener, the podcast is all about sharing experiences of mental health, but we want to talk more about things like bipolar, schizophrenia, trauma, and children who have had or had the experience of having a parent with a mental illness. So stay tuned and hopefully you'll enjoy the show. Now, just a quick update, sort of where I've been for the last 3 months. And in today's episode, I'm just going to run over some thoughts and sort of debrief, and hopefully you might be able to learn some stuff or relate to just some of these recent experiences that I've had. So anyone who knows me personally will know that my mum passed away on the 7th of February, 2022. And it was a very, very tough experience. So she had a condition which was diagnosed in around October called PSP. And even the way it was diagnosed was quite a shambles. She got air flown up from Melbourne, that she had to wait at this thing for hours. They wouldn't take her in because it's COVID times and all this sort of stuff. So she basically come up in an air ambulance and wasted thousands of the dollars of the government money. She got a good day out of it. And for the neuroscientist, I think this guy was, who basically gave me probably 10 minutes of his time to basically tell me about a condition I had no idea about, and that she's basically got, 6 months to a year to live. It was very callous how it was done. And the guy was supposed to follow up with me, and I never got one. His name was Dr. Waterson. So, it's quite interesting. We pay this money to taxes, and when you need the specialist to really help you, I don't know if your experience is like that, but they weren't there in my thing. So I haven't got a good experience with health systems in general. But the condition PSP, when I looked it up, this is basically the definition I'm going to read for you online, was it's called Progressive Supranuclear Palsy. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? And it's a rare brain disorder that causes problems with movement, walking, and balance, and eye movement. It results from damage to nerve cells in the brain that control thinking and body movement. The disorder's long name indicates that the disease worsens progressive and causes weakness, palsy, by damaging certain parts of the brain above nerve cell clusters called nuclei, supranuclear, that control eye movements. PSP, it quite often presents as Parkinson's because there's a lot of shaking and stuff, and that's what we thought my mum had. Was Parkinson's, and that's why she had to go to see the specialist who actually diagnosed her with this. And it's different in the way, even though they share sort of symptoms, it's just that it's far worse. It progresses far worse and basically shuts down your ability to swallow, eat, and drink, and then deteriorates your whole body so you can't move, and then you pass away. And there's no treatment or there's no cure for it at all. They do try and treat it with some Parkinson drugs, but it didn't work. And the last 5 months was very tough. Once you got diagnosed, you spent a couple of, I think 3 or 4 times in hospital, rushed to the emergency room. It's not a nice call to get. And then she'd spent like a week in hospital and just not talking or anything. And, sometimes you thought that was it. But, she rallied on and went back to the nursing home. But yeah, that whole 5 months when she was in and out of hospital, and I was a medical guardian, so I was getting calls all the time and things like that, and having to make decisions and about things I had really no idea about, but it was all about what was in the best interest of her. So I just wanted her to be comfortable. And then every weekend I basically drove from Melbourne to Warrnambool. In hindsight, what I should have done is I should have just spent the 5 months down there. That's what I should have done. But I didn't know how seriously she was going to progress to this stage. Now, this PSP thing, once she got diagnosed, basically took her in 5 months. However, she had if I do think back to it, she had a fall at home, and she had a couple of falls. So with PSP, the first sign of you've got this condition is you lose your balance and you fall backwards or something like that. So she had a few falls at home, and I thought she didn't want me to leave Warrnambool, so she was doing it for attention. That's how much the bipolar stuff that's how skeptical I was. But she'd done it a couple of times, and I was thinking, geez, this is getting serious. And that's when we made the decision to put her into a nursing home, not because to take away her independence or anything. It's just because it was just really unsafe with her falling. If she had a fall at home and no one was there, who knows what would happen. So we made that decision, and reluctantly she went in there, and it was all good for a while. And then, yeah, she just started deteriorating pretty quickly, especially in the last 5 months, to lose her full movement and stuff like that. And anyone who knew my mum was a very, very social person. She loved to move and up and about. And even with her little walker, she was cruising around and stuff like that as well all the time. And she was really social in the nursing home. But even in there, she had like nine unwitnessed falls, which didn't really help. And I won't go into that nursing home too much. I won't name it. But they didn't follow various processes, like you're supposed to do a neurological assessment after a fall and all that sort of stuff. None of that happened. So, it was a very stressful time for the last probably even the 5 months, but the last 2 years, to be honest, because, there was always things happening. And of course, with COVID as well, everyone was affected by COVID. I was very thankful for not having to be in a COVID, let's say, total lockdown for the whole time, because I just wouldn't have been able to deal with it. And I think we've got to have a lot of sympathy and empathy for people who've lost parents during the COVID time when they couldn't see them. I know we see that and we just think, oh, how bad it is or how cruel it is. But until you actually lose a parent, you do know how cruel that would be, that you could not be there in their final time. So, regardless of your politics on this whole thing, just as a human being, regardless of putting putting yourself before others, like, look, if you're ever in a situation where you have a parent in palliative care and someone said to you that you could not go and see them, it's unforgivable. I don't care if it's a pandemic or whatever. I think it's the cruelest thing you can do. And, the one good thing about it was I was able to see my mum the last 4 weeks, even though they had a lockdown as well. So this nursing home had a couple of lockdowns and they tried to not let me in because when someone's made palliative care, you're pretty much allowed in regardless of what's happening. So you had to put on the full stuff and go in there. And then when I got in there, I just took it off because, what was going to happen? She was in palliative care and she was triple jabbed and all that sort of stuff. But as I said, I've got real big sympathy and empathy for people who lost parents during COVID, because I just think it's, as I just said before, I think it's one of the cruelest things. And, even though you go, well, I can't imagine what that's like. No one, you can't. So I can't imagine what it would have been like not being there for my mum in her final days. So I really do send my thoughts and empathy, my empathy. I've got empathy for people in that time. But yeah, basically the last 5 months is when she really started deteriorating, lost all this weight and couldn't move and things like that. And it was a really scary thing. And then once the diagnosis came, I looked it up and I sort of going, okay, this is sort of going to be it. But I didn't know how quick it was going to be. And yeah, it really did progress really quickly, where she got some pneumonia and things like that, and ended up in the hospital and things like that. And the one clear thing I do remember during her hospital stays is she goes to me once, because basically she was deteriorating and I had to make decisions whether it was to obviously do an advanced care directive and things like that. And no one really explains it. They ring you up and go, what's her end of life plans? And that's it. That's what these doctors are like. They've got not really many people skills, some doctors. And, it's a very confronting thing about it. But you've got to sort of think, well, if something happens, does she need surgery, or do we do it, or do all these sorts of things? So it's very, very tough. She kept getting an infection actually in her gallbladder. And it was getting to a stage where they go to me, we have to give her surgery, or if she gets one more infection, she's going to die. But if she has the surgery, she's very high risk, so she could die anyway. So, getting these sort of calls and having to make these decisions when you don't have much support in regards to how to actually make these decisions. I'm not saying to get support from family, but it's very, very tough, and anyone who's a carer or medical guardian for their parent who's got health issues, I completely empathise and also sympathise with the predicament of these people. I think from looking at it, there are obviously support groups for people who have parents in palliative care and stuff like that, but I just don't think people understand how hard it is to have a parent who you're very close with, to have all these health troubles, and you're sort of helpless to do anything. Like, there's no treatments and things you can do. And, and the medical professionals, I'm not bagging them out, but I just think, the way they speak with the children or, the people involved in these decisions is just very cold and callous. And, it's probably because they see it all the time. But, it was quite an interesting experience, the whole thing. And, I'll give you one experience is when she was towards the end of the days and they're trying to still stuff around with the psychiatric medication. It's like, well, what are you doing? Like, she's in palliative care. Why do I care about the psychiatric medication? What's that actually going to do? And having to take calls from people like that and, taking her bloods unnecessarily in palliative care. Like, it was just stupid. So the whole system around palliative care and actually what is best for the patient and the systems involved could definitely do with some work, just from my experience. But I'm saying that I do empathise with all the staff, because staff are short-staffed all around Australia and they're doing their best and things like that. But I just found that the whole end-of-life palliative care sort of system and the departments talking to each other and stuff like that was quite unorganised, and from my experience, it wasn't the best. But saying that, I'm very lucky that this was in Australia and not America or somewhere like that, because it would have, who knows what would have happened if she was in that situation. Now, how do you get PSP? I looked it up, and my first sort of thing, I was pretty worried. I said to the doctor, is this genetic? Because it just come out of nowhere, this thing, and it's quite very debilitating. And a good example of PSP I can probably give you is MND, right? But MND, some people can live for 30 years with MND, whereas this thing can just go really progressive and just completely shuts you down. So My real worry was, is it genetic? If I have kids or something, can I pass it on to the kids? And the doctor basically said, no, it's not genetic. So that's a little bit of a relief. But he didn't even know my mum's history, and this is what I found concern. So when he came to her, she had an extensive history in and out of psychiatric wards, ECT and stuff like that, and he didn't even know the medical history because he was getting a bit, let's say, passive aggressive, that he couldn't get anything out of her. Well, it's like, well, of course you're not going to get anything out of her. She's not very well. Her mental state's probably not the best. And things like that. So I had to fill him in on the history. And as soon as I gave him the history, he said, oh, that probably makes a bit of sense. So she had a lot of atrophy in the brain. In my opinion, this whole thing, look, if I took out the variable of ECT and she had exactly the same life, bipolar and whatever, I think that this condition would never have happened. I can never prove that. But what my point is, an advice for anyone, if you do have a loved one or a child or whoever it is when they get older and they're trying to use ECT for the person and they haven't tried other things, don't do it. When we were growing up, and especially in our teenage years, we had no input on ECT or treatment. Even when we were older and I was an adult, we had no input on ECT. The sense that I get from the psychiatric or from these wards is that they want to get the person better as quick as possible, and sometimes that's going to be a long-term detriment. And I know, regardless of people going, oh, ECT, you might have some memory loss and that's it. Well, that's not really true. There's no explanation for why my mum got PSP, but the only thing that makes sense is that this electric shock treatment sustained over decades, plus all the drugs and stuff like that, deteriorate the brain or her part of the brain to a point where I think that this just happens. So my advice for anyone, if they do have someone who they love or know with a mental illness and there's talking about ECT, really, really think twice about it. And look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not intending this to be medical advice. But I'm just telling you from my experience and what I've seen the long-term effects of this stuff is. ECT is something for me that if they can do other treatments and spend a bit more time maybe altering medications or do other things, do them before you do ECT. Because if you have a lot of that, it's not a good thing for you. And I definitely believe it does. Look, I can't prove this statement, but I do think that all things being equal, someone who has ECT to someone doesn't, their life's going to be affected for the worst in a lot more ways if they've had ECT. In regards to going through palliative care and all that sort of stuff, if you have ever had a parent who you've lost and things like that, if they've had cancer or other conditions, I completely sympathise and empathise with you how hard it is. It's very hard to see someone who you love deteriorate. And you take the little things for granted, and then you look back on it and go, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And, I do like anyone else, like probably in this situation, you have a few regrets, and, you can't beat yourself up about the regrets. That's what I was doing. My thing was like, I wish I could be a better son and all that sort of stuff. And in the last 4 weeks, I was sort of trying to make that point. And my mum was like, hopefully I was a good enough son and stuff like that before she lost her voice. And, her spirit and her enthusiasm and positivity, right up to the end, it was quite amazing. She was very strong. I don't fully know if she comprehended what was happening to her, but I definitely do think she had an understanding of it, especially in the last week and a half. So what happened in the last 4 weeks is when she was made palliative, I never really raised to her saying, do you understand what's going on or anything like that. I was just there. So I just sat there and we just, talked and made sure she was all right, but she knew everyone was there and loved her. And the main thing, my main concern was that she knew everyone loved her and that she didn't pass away alone. Every day she had people there. I was there every day, and I was very lucky to have the support of my girlfriend and her dog, Penny, and they were fantastic, and they came as much as they could as well. And, we were there every day and spent time with her, and, got there at around 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and then spent the time until, and towards the end, we were definitely there from 10 till 10 at night. And, had our hand and, you stroke her hair and you have music and all that sort of stuff. And even though you're not saying anything or you're just sitting there watching TV, just as long as you're there and you're holding the hand, I think that's very important. And I think for your own sake, if you got a parent or a loved one or whoever who's in palliative care, just being there, you don't have to do anything. Just sit there. You just spend time. You don't have to go, oh, what am I going to say? Or I don't feel comfortable like that. You've got to put yourself second in that situation. And, to be frank, it's a very traumatic experience. And, if I had the choice again to do it, I absolutely would do it. But is it good for my own mental health, or is it good for your own mental health to be in the room with someone who's progressively dying? Probably not. But in those situations, you put yourself last and you put that person first, and you'll never, ever regret it. The best decision I made was the last 4 weeks. Just, all right, I'm going to work from down there. I'm going to spend every day with her, and that was the best thing I did. What I regret I didn't do is I didn't spend more time with her. I wish that when she got the diagnosis at 5 months, I should have just said, stuff it. You know, if they fire me at work or whatever, I don't give a crap. I'm going to go down there and be with her. But I just didn't know how much it was going to progress, and I did want to try and keep a normal life going just for my own mental health at the same stage. But yeah, the last 4 weeks, extremely tough. And anyone who's had a parent with a terminal illness and you're there with palliative care, you know, as I said at the start, I can completely empathize with your experience. And my best advice, or my couple of pieces of advice around that is, people will tell you to look after yourself and stuff like that, but it's very hard to do it. Like you're just worried about that person. You know, you don't care what you eat. You don't care about exercising and things like that, but it is very important to at least go for a walk or take a break from the room, because if you sit in a nursing home all day, you know, can be a very depressing place. But saying that, we used to try and brighten a room up, so we'd bring flowers all the time. The TV was always going, even though it was a one-way conversation. I'd be whinging about politics or something just to keep some noise in the air. And you got Spotify playing their favorite music and stuff like that, or just holding the hand of that person. That's the little things that you can do, and you can just sit there all day, and that's the most important thing as well. But in regards to mental health and looking after yourself, yeah, as I said, it's just very hard. You know, when you know you're struggling with mental health, and you know that you should be doing certain things, it's hard to do those things when you're down. When you're going well, it's easy to do things like meditate and gym, and you're up and about, and it's easy to do those things. But when you get down and when you're in a situation like that, it's very hard to do those sorts of things. So one thing I'm trying to do, or I'm going to try and do, is try and, when I'm not feeling that good, or when I'm in another situation, hopefully I never have to be like that again, but to make sure I do the basics, which is eating well, drinking plenty of water, making sure you're taking a break, go for a walk and things like that, because you do have to look after yourself so you can be mentally strong for that person. But in regards to the whole experience, yeah, as I said, look, supporting a loved one in palliative care is a very traumatic experience. I haven't got any help for it since in regards to psychological, even though I feel as though I need it. It's just because it's been very hard and it's expensive. It's expensive, you know, when you're studying for a house. I don't want to go get 6 sessions, or probably 20 sessions is what I need for like $100 and something bucks or whatever it is, to be honest with you. And I don't want to go to the pain of trying to find a good psychologist, because you're very rarely going to find a good psych on your first go. You know, you might have to try a couple or whatever, and I just don't have the patience for that. I'm not that type of person to stuff around and things like that. I just want to go in and get it done. So, yeah, I haven't had really much of a debrief. I did go to work too soon because I was probably fearful for my position and stuff like that. I work in a very dynamic environment that moves quick, and if you're not there for a bit, things can start happening. So I did go back to work a lot sooner, which I shouldn't have done. But, they're my decisions, and I'll have to just sort of use that resilience muscle and put my hand into the cookie jar from younger experiences, and then try and get through it. But yeah, no, if anyone who I know is listening to this, thank you for the messages. I got a hell of a lot of messages on Facebook and things like that. And even though it's, people saying, sorry, you lost your mum and you haven't seen him for 10 years, it means a lot, because they don't have to do it. And, the comments where people say, oh, I never met your mum, but I knew how much she meant for you. It was really, really good. And those are the comments that I'm really proud of. And, what I did is I also put her funeral up on YouTube and my eulogy tour up on YouTube. Now, people might go, well, why would you do that? Well, why I did that is because that she'll live in that digital sort of area forever. I don't care if it gets 1,000 views, 1,000,000 views, or 7 views, which it's probably got now. I don't care. It's a record of her. It's a record of my tribute to her in cyberspace there in YouTube, for example. I'll probably make an article or something out of it as well, just to sort of share how much she meant to me. And, everyone's parents means a lot to them. I don't want to speak. I don't know what your relationships are like with your parents, but if you've got a good relationship with your parent, I think there's some little things like that, in the modern age, which you can do. And, And the tough going through the last week and a half, when you're with someone who's about to pass away, you just don't want them to be scared, and you want to make your peace and stuff, which was fine, but I just didn't want them to be scared. And she stopped eating for around a week and a half, and she hung on for around a week and a half. And a funny story was around, the hospital food in there was really, really bad, and she didn't want to eat, but I brought in, and she was on thickened fluids because we didn't want to risk her getting lung infection or something like that. So, but she wasn't eating or drinking, so I had orange Gatorade and bacon crisp, and this is for before she lost her voice, and she just goes, give me some of those. And this is, she could only really chew a little bit, but she could still suck on the straw a little bit. And she was just pumping in the Gatorade and bacon flavored pork crisp and pork crackle. So she did that for around 5 more days, I think, and then she lost the complete ability to swallow and talk. And her last words to me was "I love you," which was, I was very, very lucky. And then the next day she couldn't talk, and she sort of went into that shutdown mode, which was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to be involved with. Seeing someone shut down in a week and a half, and just the sounds, they don't prepare you for that death phase. Now, I had all of her family came in, which is fantastic to see her, and I thanked them for that, because it would have been very shocking. But when someone's about to pass away, their breaths get really long between it. So you think they stop breathing, you think they've passed away, then they'll all of a sudden start breathing again. So they might take like a long breath. I don't know if you can't see this, but like it'll be held for a while, and you think they're going to pass away, and then all of a sudden they breathe again, like 30 seconds later or 25 seconds later. It's a very, very traumatic experience. I wasn't actually there for her to pass. Now, I don't know if it was done deliberately, but a lot of the hospitals said that the people, when they pass away, a lot of the time they wait until the people go. So my girlfriend and I were there the night before. We stayed there till around 10:30, and we normally come and see her around 9:30, 10 every day. Then I got a call at 9 o'clock that she had passed away. And, went into to her room, and then she was very peaceful. She almost had like a little smile on her face. And, that was her body there. But she looked at peace, and that was the thing. When this condition took hold of her, like, it was very, very bad. Like, it was her whole face was like sucked in, and like she was just struggling big time for the last week and a half. And when she passed away, looking at her body, she was at peace. And, it was really, really, it was very, very sad. But it was also, she was at peace. Now, it also makes you question, existence as a whole. Look, I'm not getting too philosophical here. I am an atheist, and I'm an atheist, and this is half the reasons why I am, is because, when you have people as sweet as my mum, who didn't deserve this, you question a lot of things in the world. You question, what if she didn't have bipolar, and, why did she get this condition? Out of all the conditions you can get, this was a very cruel one. If it was cancer or something, she might have lasted for 4 years or 5 years, but this thing was very, very cruel, and the way she passed away wasn't sudden at all. And she was so strong. The will to live in her was so strong. It was quite amazing. I don't think, I could have done it at all. I would have been very scared and stuff like that. And she just wasn't scared. She just loved having her family around. And that was a really important thing. I'm getting a bit emotional. I'm not going to cut this out, because I think it's you're supposed to, you're supposed to be, I think there's not enough genuine thoughts or authenticity around talking about this sort of stuff, because no one really talks about this stuff. When you listen to mental health podcasts and stuff, it's just about footy players and blokes saying, I've been down a couple of times, and all of a sudden we think they're mental health champions. But, to have the experience that I did with my mum was very special. It was very tough, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And I love her very much. And the best thing I think you can do if you've got a loved one is just in that last day, you just dedicate your time. So whatever you're doing, just stop it. If you're working and you're obsessed with work, like I probably would, just stop it, because you'll regret not being there. And the one thing I won't regret is that I wasn't there. I was there. She knew 1,000 times that how much I loved her, because I told her every day 1,000 times how much she meant to me and loved me. And that's very important. I don't think a lot of people, even though it was a tragic ending, a lot of people die alone. You go in that nursing home and you see a lot of people in there, and they have no visitors, no anything, and they sit in their room all day and they're just waiting for death. Whereas my mum had people coming in left, right and centre. She had always had action in her room. She had dogs, my little dog Penny, the Shih Tzu, jumping on her and licking her face and stuff like that. She had love around her, and I think that was very important. So on the positive side, to pass away with all knowing how much everyone loves you and you're a special person and stuff like that was very good on that side. But as I said, for people to get these illnesses who are really, really good people, whether it be cancer or, or PSP or MMD and stuff like that. It just shows, it's just a very, very cruel, very, very cruel world. And, you have other people who are really bad people who are out there succeeding or, getting all the lot in life. And everyone says, well, life is not fair. Well, no, it is not fair. And it's up to us, to change if we're not living in a fair situation, to actually go and pull yourself out of the matrix almost in a way and go and do something about it. So, my mum would have always wanted me just to be happy, and that's what I'm sort of been trying to really contend with, especially the last couple of months, about having a bit more self-respect for myself in regards to work and how much to do for other people and stuff like that, and just trying to start prioritizing myself and actually find my happiness. Now, finding your happiness is something that everyone says, well, I'm happy. Well, are you really? There's a lot of people with possessions up to wazoo who are very unhappy. So, and there's a lot of people who don't have anything who are genuinely very, very happy. And I know a few of those people. I'm very jealous of them because they've been able to find their happiness in what they do. So, yeah, trying to find my happiness is probably a big priority for me this year. And my mum would have just wanted me to be happy. So I'm very lucky to have a really good relationship, and that's a really big part of my happiness. But trying to find that other thing as well to sort of complete my purpose and stuff like that would be really good. And the podcast is something, I haven't been consistent at all with, but I really want to be consistent with it. And I don't know how or where it's going to go, but I just want to really get a system set up in place where I can just pump out episodes and content and have a lot of people on, because I think in the mental health space or just in podcasting space, there's a lot of well-produced things, and by all means, this is just something I do in my room, but there's well-produced things where you have it just frustrates me. You have, let's say Married at First Sight, a rerun podcast of that getting all these downloads and listens, and it's overproduced to the hill. Whereas there's nothing really that I found where we're sharing stories that people can learn from, can relate from, and move on with in regards to mental illness and things like palliative care and bipolar and schizophrenia and things like that. So it's sort of my passion at the moment, or I reckon it's one of my passions, is to try and really level the podcast up. And what I mean by that is basically record an episode weekly consistently and make sure that it gets clipped up and put onto all different channels and things like that. So I've got 3 episodes coming out this week or the next 10 days. The other episodes will be with Carly Baxter, who's actually a listener who emailed me and she sent me a message on Facebook just out of the blue and told me a story. I'm like, yep, absolutely, have you on. She's a remarkable lady. She's got a really interesting story about having a parent with bipolar who unfortunately ended her life when she was young as well. She's a very, very, very beautiful person. Susan Bluewell, who is one of the founders of Bipolar Australia. And Bipolar Australia is an organisation that helps people with bipolar and champions the causes from 2014. And that was a very interesting interview because I just get so frustrated with these organisations like Bipolar Australia not receiving the amount of funding and awareness they deserve when it affects a lot of people. More than, I think it's around 600,000 people have a bipolar in Australia, and that obviously extends to their families as well. And around 44% of all suicides come from people with bipolar. So, and to receive the lack of awareness they do and the funding is quite a concern. But she's a lovely lady, and I'm looking forward to sharing that one. I'll probably have her on again as well. I've got another one with Jim as well. The reason why I did the Jim one is sort of like probably my final one with Jim in regards to doing a podcast, because I know sort of everything about him, and probably people are getting sick of seeing him on my social media. But just having a chat to him about what he does with mental illness and mental health for the franchise group, because I don't think a lot was done back in the day. And there was an incident, which I won't go into on this, where it sort of prompted some action. In the last couple of years, I think it's definitely taken more seriously by us, which I think is good. And that will be out this week. And that's probably a really good one to listen to as well, because it's not about business. It's about mental health, mental illness, regards to franchisees and some stories and his thoughts around that. I'm actually also interviewing another lady called Zoe Carr tomorrow, who's from an organisation, I think called Lived Experience or something like that, some government organisation. She reached out to me as well and said she wanted to come on, and we're going to talk about all things to do with multiculturalism and mental health, which I think is a point which never gets raised a lot, about different cultures and the stigma, increased stigma, if you come from certain backgrounds. I'm going to interview her that tomorrow as well. World Bipolar Day is also on March 30th. So March 30th is World Bipolar Day. Sorry, I'm just going to get that music out of the way. I've gone for too long. So World Bipolar Day is on March 30 as well. And I think I'm going on Tim Beanland. Tim Beanland's a guy I've come on a couple of times to talk about stuff, but I'm sure I'll do an episode solo episode about what bipolar sort of means to me and how it's affected me and things like that. But yeah, we've got a lot coming up. And if, look, the best thing you can do, like if you're listening to this and to the end, thank you very much. But the best thing you can do for me is leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify, because that will just help with the search results and stuff like that as well. Or even if you want to come on, just send me a message on social media. All the links will be in this episode bio. And don't feel shy. The whole point, I just want to share as many people's stories as possible with mental illness, and probably other things eventually. Just because I just think we need to hear from real people. I'm sick of hearing from celebrities about their challenges, and I know why you do that, because if you have a celebrity championing a cause or a challenge or something, it sort of goes, oh, if he can get it, I can get it too, or she can have it, I can have it too. But I also think there's a lot of fluff. I think there's a lot of interesting stories, and there's a lot of intense stories with people out there, just regular Joes, with dealing with mental health. And Carly's a great example. I'm not saying Carly's a regular Joe, but Carly's a great example of just a person. When you hear his story, you go, gee whiz, to still be around and be successful, having that lived experience, when you're younger, it's just quite remarkable. So I'd rather hear that story any day of the week regarding mental health than any celebrities or any athletes or any things like that. So really check out those episodes. Now, as I've mentioned before, World Bipolar Day is on March 30th. Now, I've never really taken much notice of this day before. That's not to say that I've done it for any reason. I honestly didn't really know about it. So what frustrates me as well is we have all these, let's say, Are You Okay days, and I'm sure there's other days as well. And Bipolar Day, because we don't really know about it, because the lady Susanna told me that she was actually even told once to change the name of their organisation from Bipolar Australia, because the word bipolar has a stigma or has a sound to it. So to actually get more funding, they were told to actually change it from Bipolar Australia to like something else, let's say like Yellow Leaf Foundation or something like that, right? Which I just think was absolutely disgusting and infuriating. And like, to have that said to you about your organisation, from people, I don't know who it was exactly. I'll probably have to listen to the episode again, but it just really annoys me. We've got to call a spade a spade. If the condition is called bipolar, you can have an organisation called Bipolar Australia. If it's schizophrenia, you can have an organisation called Schizophrenia Australia. And then if the stigma's there, well, then that's the people's problem. But it doesn't. They should be able to be called a spade a spade. We shouldn't have to have all these fancy marketing names for these conditions. But her organisation started in 2014. They don't receive, I don't think, any funding at all. But yeah, that's going to be a really good episode to check out. But my thoughts on bipolar, in a quick summary in regards to what we need to do, and I covered this in the episode with Suzanne, is that if you look at the suicide rate over the last 5 years, it's not going down. And we've got all this money and awareness for all these organisations. We've got all these hotlines, but it's not going down at all. So if you look at the actual figures of who actually chooses to end their life in Australia, you probably got, I think it was around 44%. This is from a report from 2018 to 2019. I think it was 43.9% of people who committed suicide during that year or that period had bipolar disorder. And I can't remember the exact percentage of people with schizophrenia, but it would have been around, I think, more than 10% or something like that. So you've got more than 50% of the people who commit suicide in Australia have either bipolar or they have schizophrenia. Okay. Now we have all these organisations and all these peak bodies who say we're about suicide prevention. Now, if I went to their websites or their services, how they're set up, can those actual can those organisations, do they actually help people with bipolar and schizophrenia? The answer is no. So you've got organisations taking a large amount of money saying they're all about suicide prevention. Let's say Lifeline, I'm not going to name it, any others, but you can know who they are. Yet they don't cover more than half of the people who commit suicide in the year. They're not set up for it. And what frustrated me is that some of these organisations refer people who call them with bipolar, for example, to Susanna's organisation or to Susanna's resources, yet that she gets no funding. So the organisations who get all the funding to help the people can't help the people and refer them to organisations who get no money, whereas they've got all the money. And the other aspect to it as well is that we have Greg Hunt, who is a federal minister for health. Now, regardless of your stance on vaccination or whatever, Greg Hunt, if you look it up, shared a story a while back about his mother, and he had a mother with bipolar as well, and she was in and out of psychiatric wards and passed away in a psychiatric ward. And, it just really baffles me. I've actually asked him to come on. I've obviously had no response, and I don't hold that against him. I'm just a small podcast, and he's probably got tens of thousands of messages and emails. I really do. But I just think it disappoints me, like someone like that who has this position of prominence, regardless if he's in politics or not, just doesn't share his story enough. Like I think he shared it once or something like that every couple of times in a newspaper article or whatever it is. But to have that position to where you're the federal health minister and to not really put more money and attention into bipolar and schizophrenia and the children and the families who support these people, it's just really heartbreaking because, I can tell you what, I'd never be in politics, but if I was in that position, regardless of the red tape, I would at least be championing these causes. I'd be at least going, all right, Bipolar Australia, I'm going to be an ambassador for you. Satellite Foundation, I'm going to be an ambassador. Whatever it is, I'd be going out of my way to do things to actually help people who could use the help if you're in a position of influence. And to be in that position and to not really do anything for people and for organisations with bipolar who directly like Bipolar Australia, not to get any funding. It's just shocking. And, to blame things like that's Treasury's decision or Treasury doesn't want to fund it, like fair income, have a bit more gumption about you and get it done. But I just think if you are listening to this and you want to share your story, please don't be shy to email me. My details will be in the show notes as well, and please message me as well. I know this is a bit of a solo episode and I've gone on a bit of a rant, but if you have listened to the end, thank you very much. And look, I didn't edit this in any way, and it's not just because I'm lazy with this sort of stuff, but I just think, I don't mind bearing my soul, because if it helps someone in any way, or they can empathise, or it means, you're not alone if it's having a parent go through palliative care, or, if you've got a parent with mental illness or something like that, just know that there's a lot of people out there who can empathise with your situation and who are there to support you as well. I do have a Facebook group called the Lived Experience Group. It's not really active, but, if you want to chuck a message in there, you can. But please, if you ever want to come on and talk about your lived experience, just hit the show notes or the details in here and see how you can come on, and I'll be more than happy to have you on. And yeah, during this next week, I've got 3 episodes coming out, so make sure you subscribe and check them out. And if you haven't left a review or rating, please do so. And I've rambled on enough, and I'll talk to you guys next week with another probably solo episode just with what's going on and things like that. So thanks for listening, and I really do hope you have a great week. I'll talk to you soon.